The Monster of Cleveland. One of America's most notorious kidnappings was executed by a man coined the Monster of Cleveland. This story begins on August 23, 2002, when 21-year-old Michelle Knight was leaving her cousin's house in a small neighborhood in Cleveland, Ohio. Knight was the mother of a 2-year-old boy, and at the time, she found herself in a legal battle for custody of her child. On this very day, Knight was expected to appear in court for her son's custody case, but under mysterious circumstances, she never made it to the courthouse. Soon after, 2 more young women would soon suffer the same mysterious fate that Knight had. On April 21, 2003, 17-year-old Amanda Berry would go missing after her shift finished one night at a Burger King in the area. Then again, on April 2, 2004, when 14-year-old Gina DeJesus would also be reported missing. Unfortunately, their whereabouts would be kept hidden for quite some time. Investigators would not know for a very long time that these 3 missing women had something in common with each other. They were all friends or acquaintances with the children of a man who lived in the area. This man's name was Ariel Castro. Castro was born on July 10, 1960, to parents Pedro Castro and Lillian Rodriguez in the small neighborhood of Dewey on the Caribbean island of Puerto Rico. Following his parents' divorce, Castro moved to the United States with his mother and 3 siblings, settling down in Cleveland, Ohio, where some of his other family members were situated. According to Castro, his childhood was filled with violence and neglect. His mother, Lillian, had discovered that her husband, Castro's father, had a secret family in Puerto Rico, which prompted their divorce. Upon Lillian finding out, Castro's father left them for his other family, and this is when Lillian decided to move to the United States. Castro described his mother as abusive and recounted how she would hit him and his siblings daily, often with a belt or stick. Now, you can imagine that such a childhood would create some troubled adults, though trouble may be an understatement when describing Castro's demeanor as an adult. At 20 years old, Castro began dating his 17-year-old neighbor, Nilda Figueroa. A year later, Figueroa gave birth to their first child, and according to sources, this is when Castro's behavior changed drastically. Castro became extremely controlling of Figueroa, forcing her to stay at home with her child, and going as far as dictating the places at which Figueroa could shop and the content she was allowed to watch on television. Castro became increasingly violent as well, beginning to beat Figueroa to the point of breaking her bones whenever she refused to obey his orders. The police were called on Castro once by his brother, who witnessed one of these beatings. However, despite the violence she was experiencing, Figueroa refused to press charges and even went on to mother 4 more children to Castro. In 1989, Castro moved his family to a new home on 2207 Seymour Drive. In this new home, Castro began some disturbing renovations. He began padlocking every door in the house and installed a trapdoor in their basement with curtains and stone to soundproof the room. This basement would become increasingly important as this story unfolds. Castro also tinted all the windows in the rest of the house and refused to let Figueroa use their telephone, locking his family in the house for days while he went away to play shows with a band he was a part of. When Figueroa became pregnant with her last child, Castro decided that he no longer desired to have more children and attempted to cause his wife a miscarriage by punching and kicking her in her abdomen. This was unsuccessful, and in 1993, Castro pushed Figueroa down their stairs, causing her to break her skull. As Castro forced this trauma to be left untreated, Figueroa soon began to develop seizures and developed a blood clot in her brain. Growing tired of watching their mother being attacked by their father, Castro's children soon began to resent him. One night in 1993, Castro came home drunk and began attacking Figueroa. This prompted their 12-year-old son Ariel Jr. to flee the house in search of help for their mother. Castro ran after him, allowing Figueroa the opportunity to lock him out of the house and call the police. Castro was arrested that same night. A few months later, Figueroa was ordered to testify on the attack in court. However, Castro had been released on bail and found Figueroa. He threatened to kill her and their children if she testified. Terrified of Castro, Figueroa withdrew her prior claims and declared that the attack never happened, dropping all charges. Fortunately, Figueroa soon moved into her mother's home with her 5 children, and Castro cut all contact with his family. Castro began working on his house again, installing security alarms and mirrors around the home, making sure nothing could happen inside without him knowing about it. Figueroa began dating another man named Fernando Colon. Upon discovering this, Castro grew angry, claiming that Colon stole his wife from him, and eventually attempted to run him over with his car one day while Colon was taking his children to school. Colon was unharmed and attempted to press charges against Castro. However, they were dropped due to a lack of evidence. Finally, in 1997, Figueroa was granted full custody of her children, and Castro was denied all visitation rights. It's clear that Castro was an incredibly violent individual, and this violence only foreshadowed the story to come. Let's go back to August 22, 2002, when Michelle Knight left her cousin's house in search of the local social services office. According to reports, Knight was overheard in a local store asking for directions on how to get to her meeting. Now, this is 5 years after Castro's family had fully left him, and Castro claimed to have developed a growing interest in BDSM, as well as a fantasy of trapping a teenage girl in his basement. Some very dark ideation. On this day, Castro claimed to have believed that Knight was around 15 years old, due to how small she was, and having seen an opportunity, he offered Knight a drive. It was claimed that Knight had felt comfortable accepting this ride from Castro despite never having met him before, since one of his children, Emily, happened to be a friend of hers. Castro claimed he needed to make a stop at his home to feed his dogs before taking Knight to her meeting. Knight accepted this and was soon lured into his home with a promise of receiving a free puppy for herself. Castro immediately imprisoned her. The unfortunate reality for Knight was that because she was no longer a minor, the police assumed she had voluntarily run away from the legal trouble she found herself in due to her son. Because of this, little effort was made to determine her whereabouts. Fast forward to April 21, 2003, to a local Burger King where 17-year-old Amanda Berry worked with one of Castro's sons, Anthony. Castro claimed to have had his eye on Berry for a while, claiming his main interest in her was because she was young and blonde. One night after she finished her shift, Castro offered Berry a ride home. Berry accepted, claiming she felt safe since she worked with Castro's son and had gone to school with one of his daughters, Angie. Castro lured Berry into his home, claiming that his daughter Angie was there and wanted to see her. Once in his home, Castro imprisoned her. Since Berry was a minor, her family caused a public outcry about her disappearance. A week into her abduction, Castro used her cell phone to call Berry's mother, telling her that Berry was fine and that she would be home soon. Panicked, Berry's mother reported the call to authorities, who then tracked the call's source to the area where she had been abducted. However, the exact whereabouts of the call's source was not able to be determined and did not lead to Berry's discovery. A year later, on April 2, 2004, Castro's daughter Arlene was leaving school with her friend Gina DeJesus, who was related to one of Castro's band members. Castro followed the young girls in his car, and once they parted ways, Castro caught up with DeJesus, claiming he needed her help in locating his daughter. DeJesus agreed to help him and soon found herself in his home after he claimed one of his other daughters was there hoping to see her. Once inside, Castro imprisoned DeJesus. The proximity of the abductions, all occurring on Lorraine Avenue, caused the families to begin connecting the dots on the cases. However, Castro remained unsuspected and even attended organized patrols looking for DeJesus and helped her family put up missing person posters. According to sources, Castro held the 3 girls in his basement, chained to the wall with makeshift bondage and gagged. Castro had a special fixation with one of his abductees, Berry, and began claiming that she was his wife. Castro sexually abused all 3 women. Oddly, he refused to commit acts of abuse toward DeJesus and Knight inside the house, and instead committed them only outside in the backyard. Even more odd, despite neighbors seeing women chained up in Castro's yard, The police were never called. Castro not only physically abused his victims, but he also psychologically abused them by forcing them to watch news reports on their disappearances and by going as far as posting their missing person posters inside their cells. Castro's special fixation with Barry continued, and in 2007, Barry became pregnant. In response, Castro began feeding her better in hopes that the pregnancy would be carried to term. In comparison, Knight also became pregnant. However, Castro forced her to miscarry several times through violence. Barry finally gave birth to a girl whom she named Jocelyn and raised her alone in her cell, given only food and a few toys, sewing clothing for her out of her old clothes. As Jocelyn grew older, Castro began allowing the girls more freedom to roam around the house, though he always insisted on supervising them and always kept a loaded gun visible on his waistband. Disturbingly, Castro began taking Jocelyn out of his house, introducing her as his granddaughter to anyone who would listen. On May 6, 2013, Castro forgot to lock the main front door while away from the house. Barry took this opportunity to attempt to escape. However, the outermost door of the house was still locked. Barry banged on it loudly until two neighbors heard the commotion and came over. The neighbors kicked in the door, enough for Barry to crawl out, and took her to a neighbor, where she then called the police. The police responded quickly enough to rescue DeJesus and Knight from the house. That same day, authorities caught up with Castro in a parking lot. He was arrested and charged with 4 counts of kidnapping and 3 counts of rape. After the police investigation, a grand jury indicted 329 counts of various crimes against Castro, including 139 counts of rape, 177 counts of kidnapping, 7 counts of gross sexual imposition, 3 counts of felonious assault, 2 counts of aggravated murder for the forced miscarriages of Knight, and 1 count of possession of criminal tools. Castro was deemed mentally fit to stand trial. He pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison plus 1,000 years without parole. Despite attempting to avoid the death penalty, Castro hung himself in his cell using his bed sheets only a month into his sentence. Although many of these stories don't have a happy ending, this one does. Thankfully, all 3 women Castro held captive and Barry's child Jocelyn have returned home to their families and continue to live their lives. So there you have it. Do you think the system failed Castro's family and the victims involved and should have investigated Castro much earlier on? Let us know in the comments below. If you appreciated this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more true crime coverage. Thanks for watching, and see you soon in the next video.